Hello, friends. I welcome you all to a session of learning in the initiative Gyandu 2.0 of the Department of College Education, the Government of Rajasthan. And I will speak to you on tragedy as a literary term. If we go by the definitions, a common man's definition of the term, we might as well just say that tragedy is something that ends in sadness. But that is not it. We are to prepare ourselves for an exactitude that when we speak of tragedy, when we define tragedy, what we say about it should be an exact definition. A tragedy, therefore, as has been explained by the great masters of English literature, is the branch of drama that treats in a serious and dignified style the sorrowful or terrible events encountered or caused by a heroic individual. Let us try to take into consideration the components of this definition. We will try to understand each word operatively, because our focus is on an understanding of tragedy. The first thing that comes to the mind for your assimilation is it is a branch of drama. Tragedy is always a drama. A novel cannot be a tragedy. A poem cannot be a tragedy. A prose of any kind cannot be a tragedy. They may be tragic. But the term tragedy has its whole association with drama. Only a play can be called as a tragedy. Now, the next operative expression, it treats in a serious and dignified style. So, the approach in a tragedy is a serious approach. What is serious? Serious is something which affects the life of all mankind alike. सीरियस है गंभीर, और गंभीर का मतलब वह नहीं जिससे कि हमें कोई भय लगता हो या हमें कोई गहराई से कुछ बात सोचने की आती हो. सीरियस का यहाँ पर खास मतलब है वह जो सभी के जीवन को समान रूप से प्रभावित करता है. I may not be able to explain to you unless I give you an example. Let us take into consideration one of the tragedies written by Shakespeare. Now, and the tragedy could be, let us say, Macbeth. What happens in Macbeth? Macbeth, who is the general in the army of King Duncan, has been victor at 2 battlefields. And as the witches have told him on the way home that he will be the king of the 2 places that he has conquered, that is the Cawdor and Glamis. So, this actually happens when he goes back to the kingdom of Duncan, and he crowns him the Thane of Cawdor and the Thane of Glamis. But during the entreating by the King Macbeth in his home, Macbeth flies into an uncontrolled passion of ambition and kills the king. Now, this is serious. When someone is felicitating you with his presence, a man of the highest stature, and you kill him in that innocence, this is serious. Serious also means the reversal of which is not possible. Any action which you cannot reverse by any means is serious. So, tragedy is that drama which deals in the action which is serious. That means whether you commit it or I commit it, the result would be the same. And the reversal of this wrong action is just not possible. And because it is about a very high and a serious subject matter, so the dealing of tragedy must also be made in a dignified style. The style of a tragedy must match the subject matter. And what is the subject matter? The sorrowful or terrible events encountered or caused by. So, the subject matter is a sorrowful and a terrible event. Please mark this as important. Tragedy means an event, that is, an action. No tragedy is possible without an action. Macbeth could have been contemplating on killing Duncan or not. But when he does kill him, this is sorrowful. And now the tragedy would begin. So, tragedy is the branch of drama that treats in a serious and dignified style the sorrowful and terrible action or the events, either encountered by, that means suffered by a person, or caused by a heroic individual. Now, the other important word is heroic individual. What do we understand by the term heroic? Heroic is someone who is better than average. So, in this half part of the definition, I would say that 4 operative words that you have to understand is: tragedy is always a drama. It is a serious subject, serious which is irreversible. The style of this drama is always dignified and is either faced by or caused by a man who is better than average. Coming forward to yet another definition of the word tragedy, it has come to us that traditionally the event which would require some element of moral failure or some flaw in character. So, moral failure. What is moral failure? We people, all human beings, are composed of strengths and weaknesses. When the weakness gets the better of us, that is a moral failure. हम सभी लोग, कुछ हमारी कमज़ोरियाँ होती हैं और कुछ हमारी ताकतें होती हैं. हमारी ताकतें हमें हमेशा उत्तम मनुष्य बनाती हैं, किंतु जब हम किसी अपनी कमज़ोरी को हमारी ताकत पर हावी होने देते हैं, वही हमारा नैतिक पतन होता है. That is the moral failure. So, this heroic individual, go back to the 4th line, this heroic individual does something which is a moral failure. And how does he do it? He does it because of some flaw in character. In his personality, there is a flaw. Flaw is weakness, a kind of breach, a kind of gap. With this breach, with this weakness, he commits the error. And thereby comes the tragedy. Now, when you write something about tragedy, this is how you should begin. Define the term. And we have understood that it will be a play, that it will be serious, in a dignified style, and conducted by a heroic individual, an action motivated either by a moral failure or by some flaw in character. Now, how does tragedy, what is the course of tragedy? What are the stages in tragedy? वो जो एक्शन होता है ट्रेजेडी का, वो एक्शन क्या होता है, कैसे ट्रेजेडी लिखी जाती है? A tragedy is not the whole life story of the central character. The stages of tragedy is likewise. First being exposition. Exposition means commitment of error. ट्रेजेडी शुरू कहाँ से होती है? जहाँ पर केंद्रीय व्यक्ति, मुख्य पात्र गलती करता है. उसके पहले की किसी भी चीज़ की ज़रूरत नहीं है ट्रेजेडी की डेफिनेशन में. इट इज़ नॉट नीडेड वेयर ही वॉज बॉर्न और वॉट हैपन टू हिम. नो, ओनली एट द पॉइंट ऑफ द मॉरल फेलियर, only at the point of an erroneous judgment where he commits the error, that is exposition. यहाँ से उसका चरित्र एक्सपोज होता है कि वो गलती भी करने के लिए योग्य है. उसमें ये वीकनेस आ सकती है कि वो गलती कर ले. सो ट्रेजेडी का एक्शन जो होता है वो कैसे चलता है? First is commitment of error, which we call as hamartia, Hamartia. I have also uploaded yet another video on this topic, and I will share the link of that video here, in which you can study in details the things which I have written towards the right hand side of this page, of this sheet. Now, from the commitment of error, from the point of time that the central character commits the error, the action will move high. And what will happen? There will be a reversal in the fortunes of the central character. The man, Macbeth, who was so much honored in his society as the bravest of all generals in the army of Duncan, when he kills Duncan, when the commitment of error of killing Duncan is caused, then his fortunes are reversed. All the people who admired him started hating him. So here is the rising action. वो action ऐसे आगे बढ़ता जाता है, which goes to the climax. The climax is that the central character in a tragedy realizes his error. When he has realized, and I have already told you that he is a character better than average, वो आम आदमियों से वो बहुत बेहतर आदमी है. गलती तो हो गई, एक कमज़ोरी के अंतर्गत आके गलती हो गई, ही कमिटेड द एरर, और उसका भाग्य भी परिवर्तित हो गया और उसको रियलाइज़ भी हो गया. तो अब वो जिंदा नहीं रहेगा. And in a tragedy, he must be killed, which is the falling action. That is death of the protagonist. Protagonist means central character, जिसके ऊपर tragedy लिखी गई है. और tragedies, traditionally it is like that the name of the title of the tragedy is always after the central character, always after the person who is the protagonist, the chief character. So in a tragedy, after the person has committed the error and his fortunes are reversed and he has had a realization, he will have to die. With the death of the protagonist, the denouement is the final stage in a tragedy, which is a Greek word and which means poetic justice. Now, this is very important. In a tragedy, the man who was good, who was much better than the others, he committed only one error. Should we allow him to go scot free? If we allow even a good person to be rid of the guilt of committing the error, a message will go to the audience that it is okay to do one or two evil acts. ये संदेश पहुंचेगा कि एक अच्छे आदमी के लिए एक या दो गलती करना कोई बात नहीं है, उसे माफ कर देना चाहिए. लेकिन ट्रेजेडी एक्चुअली is the finest of all literary art. It will not allow for the person to be forgiven. The action, we have already understood that it is a serious action, an irreversible action which cannot be amended for, which cannot be, reversal of that is possible. You cannot make amends for the wrongs that have been done. So the poetic justice should prevail. न्याय की स्थापना होनी ही चाहिए. This is the poetic purpose of a tragedy. So, in this clause of stages of tragedy, what you have to understand is tragedy begins, stages are steps. Tragedy begins in the commitment of error, which logically go to the reversal and the realization, or the realization and the reversal, which ultimately have to bring the death of the protagonist, and with the death of the protagonist, establishment of poetic justice has to be done. ट्रेजेडी के लिए अवश्यम भावी है कि गलती हो गई है तो उसके परिणाम स्वरूप, क्योंकि वो गलती का मैग्नीट्यूड बहुत ज़्यादा था, बहुत गहराई पूर्ण थी, इसलिए अंत में उसको मरना ही न्याय की स्थापना के लिए आवश्यक है. Now, what are the various kinds of tragedy? We will try to understand the kinds of tragedy on the basis of plot structure. Plot, what I told you just now, is this. Plotting is, जब छोटे बच्चों को हम ड्राइंग सिखाते हैं तो डॉट्स डॉट्स बना देते हैं. जैसे इफ़ वी हैव टू टीच देम टू ड्रॉ एन एप्पल, वी विल plot the dots in such a manner that when a child runs his pencil, he will be able to create the image of an apple. So ये जो plotting है कि error होगा, फिर उसके बाद reversal होगा, फिर realization, death होगी और poetic justice होगी, इस plot structure के आधार पर there are 4 kinds of tragedies. The first is the complex tragedy, which is made up of peripety and anagnorisis. Peripety is reversal of fortune, which I said in the previous page, and anagnorisis is realization of error. So the first and the most complex kind of tragedy, which are mostly and which have been advocated by the great father of this literary genre, Aristotle, who has documented a whole text called Poetics about tragedy, he advocates that that tragedy is the best one, in which the Protagonist, after committing the error, will experience a reversal of fortune and realization of error. This is complex tragedy. The plot will consist of commitment of error, reversal of fortune, realization of error, and of course the death of the character, because unless that happens, there can be no tragedy. So the example of this I told you is Macbeth. The second on the basis of plot structure is the tragedy of suffering. The tragedy of suffering is a kind of tragedy in which the central character suffers because of some external agent. Something from outside cause his suffering, like fate. In ancient Greek tragedies, the central characters suffered because fate decided that for them. And here, can there be the understanding of a great tragedy written by the Greek playwright Sophocles, and the tragedy is called Oedipus Tyrannus. Also, an understanding of this tragedy I will put down in the information, the link of which also I will serve with this video. So, tragedy of suffering, here you can give the example of Oedipus Tyrannus, the character who suffers because fate had destined such. The third kind of tragedy is the tragedy of character. Now, what is character? Character actually has got two meanings. Character is the dramatic personage, वह व्यक्ति जो किसी पात्र को जीवंत कर रहा है स्टेज पर, तो वो व्यक्ति भी कैरेक्टर है. द सेकेंड मीनिंग ऑफ कैरेक्टर इज बेंट ऑफ माइंड, उसकी मानसिक दशा, उसकी मानसिक स्थिति, उसके वैयक्तिक गुण, तो उसके अंदर के गुण भी कैरेक्टर्स होते हैं. तो समटाइम द थर्ड काइंड ऑफ ट्रेजेडी इज द ट्रेजेडी ऑफ कैरेक्टर, एंड इन दिस ऑल्सो you can give the example of Macbeth. Macbeth suffers because his character was wrought with ambition. And fourth kind of tragedy on the basis of plot structure is the tragedy of spectacle. Spectacle is scene. The scenes are so painful that they evoke tragedy in our hearts. And furthermore, the classification of tragedies on the basis of origins. Origin is जन्म उनका कहाँ पर हुआ, तो ट्रेजेडी का मूलभूत जन्म हुआ ग्रीस में, क्योंकि सारा वेस्टर्न लिटरेचर आया है ग्रीस से. ग्रीस से लिटरेचर ट्रैवल किया, इट वेंट ऑन टू इटली, फ्रॉम इटली इट ट्रैवल्ड ऑन टू France, and from France it came to England. So when you are making your understanding of English literature, you will have to go and seek the roots in Greece. So the first kind of tragedy on the basis of origin is the Greek tragedy. Now what are Greek tragedies? An example of Greek tragedy is Oedipus Tyrannus, as I told you earlier, written by Sophocles. तो ग्रीक ट्रेजेडी कैसे खास होती थी? उसमें भाग्य प्रमुख होता था. मनुष्य जो कुछ भी करता था वो केवल भाग्य के कारण करता था. देयर वॉज प्रीडोमिनेंस ऑफ फेट इन ग्रीक ट्रेजेडी. द सेकेंड काइंड ऑफ ट्रेजेडी, some kind of tragedies developed in Rome, so they are called Roman tragedies. They are about Roman characters. And in these tragedies, preference for entertainment over drama is given, is made. They subjugate drama and lay more emphasis on entertainment and the subjects of Roman tragedies were powerful people. So I can give you two examples written by Shakespeare, the father of English drama, and these two tragedies, Antony and Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, are the kinds of Roman tragedies because they are about very powerful people. The third were the English tragedies, Elizabethan and Jacobean tragedies. So Elizabethan are all tragedies written during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, which were about some very good character and who suffered a flaw. Flaw is weakness. Who suffered a flaw in character or made an error of judgment. Example of Elizabethan tragedy is Dr. Faustus, in which Dr. Faustus is a supremely scholarly character from Germany. In the times when Germany was under the power of the Prince of Parma and children had no scope to go to the college, to go even to the schools. In that time, he excelled, Dr. Faustus. He excelled even though of a very base birth, coming from very poor family. He rose up to the high standard, high status of being a doctor, excelling in theology, in astronomy, and in physics. But he has a flaw in character. He is not happy to live as a man. He wants to be a superman, and despite all his learning of physics, wants to control the heavenly bodies. So this is the predominance of flaw in character. उसमें एक कमजोरी है, मनुष्य रहने से वह संतुष्ट नहीं है. वो सबसे ज़्यादा इज्जतदार व्यक्ति है, सबसे ज़्यादा श्रद्धा उसके प्रति समाज में है, लेकिन वह बनना चाहता है महामानव और हेवनली बॉडीज़ को कंट्रोल करना चाहता है, विच नॉट इज़ डेस्टिन्ड फॉर एनी मैन ever born on earth. So that is that. And he either has an error of judgment, he makes error in judgment. And the example of Jacobean tragedy is Macbeth. Macbeth, where instead of trying to judge a man so strong in body that single-handedly he can control Glamis and Cawdor, but he is unable to control the rising passion in his heart and makes an error of judgment and acts at the behest of his wife. The fourth, and a modern kind of tragedy, though I am not dealing too much with the most modern kinds, but is a revenge tragedy. Revenge tragedy is a special kind of tragedy in which ghosts and supernatural material is employed. There is murder, there is insanity, and revenge against a stronger opponent for a wrongdoing. ये वो ट्रेजेडीज़ होती हैं जिसमें सेंट्रल कैरेक्टर बदला लेता है क्योंकि उसको गोस्ट्स दिखाई देते हैं और कुछ सुपरनैचुरल एलिमेंट्स होते हैं दैट गोड हिम इनटू एक्शन. एंड दिस example of revenge tragedy is Hamlet, in which the scholarly Hamlet is visited by the ghost of his father and infuriated against the injustice done to his father, he goes on to take revenge upon his uncle and also doesn't spare his mother who has been a part in the crime. So, this is all about tragedy. I hope this equips you to make an analysis of all the plays ending in a sad mode, not because just fate has destined that, not because the ghosts have told him, but largely because the heroic character conducts some kind of moral failure, driven by some flaw in character, and his personality is represented into a drama form for us to see how an act committed erroneously will bring sad consequences. Thank you.